Hello and welcome. Welcome to RebelRed 2026. Every year I try and make a video about the color of the year ahead. And this year I'm going to be talking about the color of red and how you can use that in the year ahead. Um, Not only is it a red year, but in Chinese astrology, we're coming out of the year of the snake, which is very appropriate for the gold year that we've just left. You know, kind of gold, like the snake, is the year of endings, shedding the old and letting go. And we're heading into, in Chinese astrology, into the year of the horse, but not just any horse. It is going to be the year of the fire horse. So again, a lot of kind of dynamic energy. And in color psychodynamics, this is the year of Rebel Red, and it's all about beginning again. And the reason I like to do and look at the year ahead from a color perspective is to look at what is the archetypal soup that I'm going to be swimming in during this year. And then knowing that, how can I use this energy to navigate and understand what's happening and how I can use it for myself, but also to understand what's happening in the world around me. And the best way I can do that is to start sharing with you a PowerPoint presentation with hopefully lots of nice little pictures and comments, which will help me focus and give focus to what I'm going to talk to you about. So, this is it. Rebel Red 2026, let us begin again. And as that quote says, is once upon a time is how stories begin. And like I said, this year is the beginning of a new 9-year cycle. So, as much as you might think about what is my New Year intentions, what are my goals for 2026, you might also want to start and think about what is it I want to achieve in the coming 9 years, and think about what things you want to begin, what you can let go of from the last 9 years, and then how you can use this year, this dynamic red energy, to set the intention for the next 9 years ahead. Now, before we talk about and go more into red, I want to talk about the Pantone's color of the year. Every year, if you don't know, every year Pantone release a color of the year at the end of the previous year. And I've been following them for a number of years to look and to see the color that they suggest for the year ahead and how that relates to the archetypal color of the year. Now, every time Pantone release a color of the year, there's always reactions. People like it, they don't like it, they love it, they hate it. But I think this year, more than any other, people have been incredibly passionate and vocal about Pantone's color of the year. What I find is that when you talk to people about likes and dislikes of color, when they talk about their likes, they're pretty, yeah, okay, I love this color, I like this color. But get people to talk about their dislikes of color, and they are incredibly passionate. Their energy seems to and they will really tell you why they dislike that color. And this is what I've noticed in reactions to Pantone's color of the year 2026, which is called Cloud Dancer. It's a kind of white. And this is a personal description of how I see it. You know, when you've got white clothes and you've washed them one or too many times and they start to lose the pure whiteness, and there's a sort of a grey white, not white white. To me, that's how I would describe this white. It's maybe it's not everyone's description, but that's how I see it. And the response to this Pantone's color of the year has been that people have been, like I said, really passionate. They've accused Pantone and said Pantone need to go back to the beginning. They need to stop doing this. It makes no sense. They've been accused of racism and supporting kind of far right because of the and white nationalism because of the color of the year. So, kind of people you've heard me say probably many times is color is with us all the time and we don't really take notice of it. But when we do take notice, people are really passionate about it and they have very specific intentions with it and they know what it means to them. This is how Pantone describe their color of the year. They describe it as a whisper of calm and peace in a noisy world. Wiping the slate clean, which I think is really great and connects really well with the new 9 year cycle and red all about beginning again. And equally, they say it's a conscious statement of simplification. Cloud Dancer enhances our focus, providing release from the distraction of external influences. Because let's face it, at this moment in time where we are in the world, in society, it's very busy. We get distracted all over the place. And white, like all color in a way, is quite paradox because on one hand you have its purity, its calm, and its peace, which is great and which is what everyone is exactly what Pantone are talking about. However, I'm going to give it another aspect and saying, well, the reason we have this, and maybe Pantone are saying we need this, is because we have so much sensory overload on our screens. Color is all there, so maybe by neutralizing our environment, it allows the system, as in our bodies, to actually reset, calm down, rest, and relax. Because if we're constantly looking at all this color on screen, maybe we need this neutral environment around us. There's this whole debate around that. And well, this is not to do with white. I have a myself and various other color specialists, social scientists, people who study color and society are noticing that there's a gradual disappearance of color availability. An example of that would be look at the availability of the color of cars in the 1980s to what is available now. Also in textiles, color is much more expensive to produce than neutrals. And my biggest bugbear is about our overuse of grey in interiors. I really, really think if I watch another interior design program or a house renovation program and they say, and here is your new house, here is your new room, and it's just grey, grey, grey. It's like we have really we've overdone the 50 shades of grey. And my fear is that we're losing that. We're losing our sense of color. And it's a question that many people are asking is, are we heading towards cultural chromophobia? That is that fear of actually using color in interiors and maybe, well, not so much in clothing, but certainly in interiors. And I'll also tell you why I have a slight concern about this. Well, no, it's not a slight concern, it's a concern about our overuse of grey, because in color therapy, grey is connected to a disconnection from emotional pain. So it's one of those questions to actually ponder and to think about. is like, well, if we're surrounding ourselves with so much gray, are we now becoming so desensitized that we stop seeing and feeling everything that's happening in the world? It's one of those questions that you have to ask yourself and draw your own conclusions. Certainly for me, I really, really wish that we would stop using the too much gray and start bringing color back. Certainly, one of my New Year's resolutions or my resolutions for 2026 is to create a kind of color revolution. And it is, yep, revolution, not revolution, a color revolution of bringing the color back. So if you're about to decorate or you have an influence on something and you are heading for the gray, just stop and think, is there another color that I could actually use instead of this? Because think about it. Here in the UK, and maybe other parts of Northern Europe, but certainly in the UK, we're known for complaining about the weather. We're always talking about how grey it is. So my question is, if we're complaining about how grey it is on the outside, why do you want to put it on the inside? So that's something to consider. Overdone 50 Shades of Grey, bring the color back. So let us begin again. And as this says, there's this quote from Paulo Coelho. It says, if you are brave enough to say goodbye, life will reward you with a new hello. And that is saying goodbye to the last 9 years. And the reward is hello to the next new 9 years, the next 9 years ahead. And what I've done is calculated and given these examples of previous red years. 2017, 2008, 1999, 1990, 1981, 1972, 63, and so on have all been red years. And so when I'm looking about a personal influence of how does a red year affect me, I look back and what were the themes and the patterns that I noticed that happened to me during those previous red years? Then I know what energy and how red and the rebel affects me during this year. What I notice is that on all of these years, certainly in adulthood, every red year, I start working overseas in a faraway country that I've never been to before. And when I looked back, right back to 1963, I realized that was my year of conception. I was born in 64, but I was conceived in 1963. So that is certainly a new beginning for me. So it's look back. What happened? What was going on for you? What were the themes and the patterns that you noticed? And of course, this calculations is using the Gregorian calendar, but I also want to mention the Islamic calendar. And this year, that's something different. In the Islamic New Year, that comes out as a rose year. So it is the year of the lover. And in the Hindu calendar, we're coming into a green year, which is the gardener. Now, all of these archetypes that I mention are all specific to the color psychodynamics methodology. There'll be another video about that soon. But if you work cross-culturally or you're involved and connected to any of these other communities, how you can work with it. And what I love about working with archetypes is play with it, create stories. Remember, kind of stories are the way we function and the way we get through the world. So you might say, for example, well, once upon a time, a rebel, a lover, and a gardener all met. Or if you're just working across one culture, two cultures, you might say, well, a rebel and a lover met. How do they get on? What are their dynamics? What are their challenges? If you work cross-culturally in business, how do they do business together? Again, what are the challenges? That's what I love about archetypes. They allow us to be very creative and a little bit playful and imaginative. And yes, we have that's the collective year color, but what about a personal year color? Now, a personal year color is where you take the day and the month of your birthday and add the current year. So it's adding 2026 to the day and the month of your actual birthday. Excuse me. So here I've used an example of mine. So this, and I add all of those numbers together, and it gives me a number of eight, which in then translates in color psychodynamics to the color rose. And that tells me, yes, we're in a collective red year, but what is my personal year color? And just to show you what the archetypes are and what year color you may be entering. Kind of we have number one, which is the rebel, number two, which is the orange jester, number three, which is the yellow warrior, number four, which is the gardener, number five is the blue storyteller, number six is the indigo magician, number seven is the Violet Sovereign. Number eight is the Rose Lover. And number nine is the Gold Sage. So by doing that, you then get to know what is my personal year color. And then, of course, if you've been following me or you know about color psychodynamics, you know that we also all have a life path color, and that's based on your date of birth. If you don't know your color, you can check that out from my website, and I will put the link in the comments below that you can so you can calculate your color. And so what you can do is you can take your life path color, your personal year color, and the collective year color, and put them all together. And then and you're getting more personal about what kind of year are you having and what kind of archetypal energy are you working with during this year ahead. So for me, my life path color is gold. So that's the sage. My personal year color is rose, which is the lover. And the collective year color, that's 2026, is the rebel. Again, come back to the example I gave. So imagine that the sage is the constant. Then I have if you want to imagine that I have a relative who's coming to visit, a close relative who's coming to visit for this year. And that is, in this case, the rose lover. And then I have another relative who, well, maybe is a little bit more distant, and that is red. That is the rebel. And they're all going to be together for a year. And what's the dynamics? How do they work together? How can they complement each other? And what can I do to help me understand and navigate the year ahead for me? That's how to work with them, and archetypes are universal. So just to say that, so for example, the lover, I might imagine something completely different to you. And that's okay because that's archetypes. They're universal symbols and they will mean something to each and every one of us. So that's how you can use that energy. So let's start with red. And Plato says the beginning is the most important part of the work. And red is the absolute beginning. That's where it all begins. Um, it's very active, it's very solid. Think of all the things that are red. It commands attention. It's very immediate in the here and now. There's no thought of yesterday or what's happening tomorrow. It is all about right here, right now. And in numerology, it is equivalent to the number one. So think about if you want to get the energy of this year, think about how, think of number one and red. You might think of number one is always first. Think of things like Ferrari. Everything is fast and immediate. Think of sale signs, always in red. It's only afterwards when we get home and we will think, well, why did I buy that? That's the energy of red. That's the energy that we're working with. Things happen quickly, immediately, and sometimes taken by surprise. And this is the paradox of red. So you've got all this sort of chaotic, dynamic energy, and yet in sacred geometry, it's connected to a square. And a square is very solid and very grounded. You know, if you look at a pyramid, it has a square base. Everything can be built upon a red. You know, everything can be built upon a square, sorry. And which again, why it's quite significant that this is the beginning of a new 9 year cycle. So this is the square. This is where you're beginning. You're building for the next 9 years. Think of it as like laying the foundations for the next 9 year cycle. In in the chakra system, it is related to the base or to the root chakra. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it relates red, and the base chakra relates to our primary survival needs. So that's kind of air, food, shelter. And also, what I found over 40 years of working with color and archetype, it's understanding that developmentally, red relates to the developmental age between zero, so that's from birth, to 2 years old. Someone said, does that include pre-birth whilst we're in utero? Nope, that's a different color. And equally in color psychodynamics, like I said, the archetype is that of the rebel. And the archetypes, for me, the ones I use in color psychodynamics, have developed over what over the it's 39 years this year, 39 years of field work, you know, of being out traveling around the world, meeting all these people, working with life path colors and color psychodynamics, what I now call color psychodynamics profiling. And this is the energies that I've noticed and the best way to help people understand the energy of a color. And like I said, red is all about action. It's about now. It's dynamic, and it's just do it. You know, it's very spontaneous. And we'll talk about and I'll talk about the difference between impulsive and spontaneous, because they're very, very different in a moment. So when we talk about beginnings, one of the best places we can start and one of the greatest beginnings we have is our birth. That's where it all began. You know, I love this quote from William Blake. My mother groaned, my father wept, into the dangerous world I leapt. And our birth story is the beginning. You know, that's where we sort of took our first breath of life, and that's where our story began. And in-depth psychology, if you want to understand and know how you navigate change, and certainly big change and new beginnings, look back to your birth story. kind of how was it? What are the stories about how you were born? Was your mother in labor a long time? Was it a short term? What happened? And equally, you might want to look at is what was happening locally, what was happening in the city, the village, the town where you were born, what was happening, kind of in the country you were born, what was happening on a societal level. All of this shapes the energy that we're born into. It's that archetypal soup that we are born into at that specific time. And the reason I say that's important, because as Mark Twain says here, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And the finding out why is not so much about what should I be doing. People look at purpose and they always think about what job or what career should I follow. Maybe that is part of that, but it's more about who was I born to be. And that, in part, is the essence of color psychodynamics, of helping you to understand who was I born to be. We're told we can be anything we want to be certainly in the Western world or in the developed industrial society. But a deeper question is, am I being who I was born to be? And that takes some time and reflection. And one of the best places to start that I've always found is, what was your birth story? And talking of birth story, I'm always amazed of when I work with companies and businesses and they're a little bit stuck and we're looking at how to maybe bring creativity back and create new visions for the sort of the year or time ahead, how very few people know the creation story. That's another birth story. That's a different version. That's another birth story in a way. How did it all begin? If you yourself have your own business, if you're self-employed, or you have a small business, self-employed as sole trader, um, what was the decision that made you make that leap to do that? What was it? Because around that time, there's a lot of chaotic red energy because it's the beginning, it's the birth of a new story. It's the birth of your business. So if you're feeling, if you're with your work, your career, if you're in a little bit of a slump, in a way, if you're a little bit grey, go back to the beginning. How did it all begin? What was there? Who was there? What were the dynamics? What were the decisions? What was it that made you make and take, as I said, take that leap of faith? And part of our story is always looking at, who are your people? And when we know our people, it's part of our sense of belonging. And as this quote says, I love this proverb, this African proverb, is when the roots are deep, there is no need to fear the wind. And to me, my interpretation of this part, certainly the first part, when the roots are deep, part of that is, as I've said before, is knowing your birth story. Where did it all begin? However it began, good or bad, disaster, whatever, everyone has a beginning place. And whatever that is, that gives you a roots, that gives you a sense of belonging. So wherever you move to or wherever you are in the world, when you know your roots, you have a place, a deep sense of connection. And part of when the roots are deep is about knowing about your ancestors. Part of your people is the family from where we come from. It could be biological, it could be adopted family, but it's about knowing the histories and the stories. And when people hear about ancestral healing using whatever methodology, very often people think of it's about healing the trauma, kind of the pains, the unfinished business. But in my work with ancestors, it's also about looking for the resources, looking for the strengths, looking for the stories of people who really survived adversity, um, and who succeeded and maybe followed a dream that no one else thought they could do. Tap into those as well, because that then, by knowing those people and knowing those stories, it helps to balance out maybe the ancestors who have challenges and who have unfinished business. It's almost like we balance out one with the other. So I always think with ancestral healing, it's also about connecting with healthy, wise, healed ancestors. They become part of your resources, and they also help you to really connect and deepen your roots. And talking of roots, and I love this quote from Jung: the soil of every country holds some mystery. We have an unconscious reflection of this in the psyche. Just as there is a relationship between mind to body, so there is a relationship of body to earth. And to me, and again, this is my interpretation of this and following on from the connection of the roots, is when you know where you're born, the country and the place where you're born, we all carry a piece of that deep within our psyche. And part of us becoming who we were born to be somehow helps to heal that piece of the land. So we may go out into the world, come away from where we were born, but somehow we will always carry a piece of that land, the energetic form of that land, and the everything that's happened on that land in our psyche. Mm. And also, part of your people is your friends, your tribe, the people you feel that you belong to, the people where you feel you belong, you can be fully yourself, you can relax, uh, different to maybe family. It's your tribe. It's really in that sense of belonging. And when we feel we belong, we also have deep roots. And equally, along with your people are your colleagues, your work colleagues. If you have a profession, if you have a vocation, and whatever you do, think of all of the people who came before you, who've followed in that line of work. You know, when people think of ancestors, they very often think of family. But when I think of ancestors, I'm thinking of family ancestors, and then beyond family ancestors is your professional ancestors. So, for example, I work with color, and so I know that my professional ancestors are all of those hundreds and thousands of people who came before me, going way back to ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and before all the places around the world where they used color as a form of healing, as a way of understanding themselves. All I'm connected to those. So anytime I'm feeling a bit stuck or want to understand, have a deeper connection with color, I can tap in to my professional color ancestry. So it's thinking about, a big part of color psychodynamics is the work of Carl Jung. Therefore, he's part of my professional ancestry, because that's a way, in the art world, if they want to verify something is an original piece of art, a sculpture, whatever, they always talk about looking for its provenance, which means looking for its originality. Where did it come from? What's its history? And I believe that when we know our family ancestry, we know our tribes, and certainly we know our professional ancestry, in a way, we're connecting and deepening our provenance. And therefore, when we have the roots are deep, when we have that strong sense of connection, and to me, that's what the red square is made up of, whatever then happens, whatever winds come to pass, whatever storms pass through in the everyday, I know I've got these resources to fall back on. This is what keeps me, it could be really chaotic, and the world is going through huge changes at the moment. Um, but if I know I've got this solid base, then I know whatever's happening, at times it can be scary, is not taking away that, but I have this place to come back to, of this real feeling of belonging. And that's a way that you can actually use the red energy and the rebel energy, which we'll talk about in a moment, for the year ahead. And red asks, where do you belong? Who are your tribe? And will you be brave and will you act from where you belong and for your tribe and what you believe in? Is this year is a real invitation to be brave and daring. And also part of that is taking action as well. So here we are. Let's talk about the rebel. Now, I know in some cultures, the rebel has a bit of a negative connotation. So I've seen other words for the rebel or other terminologies. That can be the revolutionary. It can also be another word that I use in sometimes term I use instead of the rebel, can be the pioneer. It's always about bringing in the new. However, for me, the energy of the term the rebel really says it exactly as it is. That's why I love this quote. I rebel, therefore I exist. And that is so red. I exist. That is what red is all about. I am, I exist. No hesitation. And we can't not talk about the rebel and not talk about this film, or certainly mention it. And there's many different ways of the rebel. And part of the embracing the energy of this year is to think about the rebel within yourself. How is it played out? How do you use that energy? Maybe the first place and certainly the essence of this film or part of that film is about a teenager, a young person who starts to rebel against the parents. That's one of the first areas that that we can notice about the rebel. How was that for you? Did you go against when we're working with the rebel, we're sort of testing the boundaries. We're pushing against to say, no, I want to do it my way. Therefore, I exist to prove I exist separate to you. And a wonderful, wonderful film that really, in a way, brings out the rebel. This is from the film The Dressmaker with Kate Winslet. I had to think of her name for a moment. It is a film called The Dressmaker with Kate Winslet. And she is a rebel, but she is a rebel with a cause because she returns to a small town in the Australian outback to set a record straight. And while she's been away, she's learned to be a dressmaker. Fabulous film. Kate Winslet, I used her here because it's fabulous the way she looks in that red, but also because Kate Winslet is on a red life path. So just think about how does the rebel play out in you? And a rebel, the noun of the rebel, means someone who exhibits great independence in thought and action. And I want to be almost like first talk about a rebel without a cause. You might say this is too much red, when the rebel gets almost in a way over inflated. And a rebel without a cause is impulsive. Do you remember I said I'm going to tell you the difference between impulsive and spontaneous? So impulsive is just reacting and saying whatever comes out of your mouth in the moment without thinking about it. Spontaneous is about acting from inspired action. And so that means spontaneous, it comes from something greater than myself. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So a rebel without a cause, with too much red, if you like, is impulsive, dominating, reactionary, is very bullying and very selfish. And when they bring in the new, it is just purely for self gain or for the gain of a very few. A rebel usually brings about change, which will inevitably bring about something new for many people, for the tribe, if you like, for the collective. Um, and on its opposite side, when there's another side of the rebel, again without a cause, it's almost like when, in a way, when there's not any energy at all, but it's still there. Um, this is what I call the victim, or this is victim mentality. It's very low energy. It's always blaming someone else. I don't know, it's my partner's fault, it's my parents' fault, it's the country's fault, it's the government's fault. It's always someone else's fault. So there's no responsibility whatsoever. And if you do make a suggestion of how they could change, you're always met with yes, but. Underneath all of that, deep underneath, is a fear of change. Because if I'm in this space, the fear of change is because I then have to be responsible for the actions that I take. There's a Brené Brown quotes I forget where the original poem is from, but it's something called The Arena. And it goes something like this. Uh, Excuse the language. She says, if you're not up here on the stage getting your ass kicked, I am just not interested in your feedback, because there are many people sitting in the cheap seats who do nothing but criticize, judge, and blame without ever doing anything themselves. So think of it like this. Red encourages us to be, and the rebel encourages us to do something brave and do something daring. Brave can be the smallest thing. You know, what to you is bravery? That's what it is. Whatever that is, absolutely fine. Because there are many people who say, oh, you should do this, you should do this. And then you say, well, and what are you doing? Ah, nothing. Well, like it says, unless you're up here on the stage getting your ass kicked, I'm just not interested in your feedback. And equally, when we make the act and we step out and do something different, it's almost like we need a reason for that. Because as Khalil Gibran says, rebellion without truth is like spring in a bleak, arid desert. We need to almost like have a reason to rebel and take on that energy. And this quote from Rollo May: recall how often in human history the saint and the rebel have been the same person. A rebel with a cause is spontaneous. Like I said, they act red energy, the rebel, the true rebel, acts with a cause. They're spontaneous, meaning inspired action, which implies and says there is something that is coming through me, which is greater than myself, which then encourages me to be brave and daring. And sometimes it just takes one person to start leading the way. If you've ever been in a group and people are kind of sitting in the group and they go, oh, well, I know I don't like this and I don't like this. And eventually the group will choose someone to say, you go and speak. You say something. You be the one who brings about the new. And sometimes it is one person. Maybe we belong to a tribe, whatever that tribe is. We belong to a tribe and we start to think something doesn't feel right. This no longer fits my idea. And it takes someone to be that rebel energy, to be bold, brave, and daring to step away. Because sometimes rebel energy can be very solitary. It can be an independent act. It's going against the norm. It's challenging the norm. So a rebel with a cause is birthing the new, which is brave. It's also chaotic and exciting and always tinged with a hint of danger and a certain amount of fear of the unknown. Think about this. Anytime, if you do anything creative or you've given birth, it's never smooth. There's always a lot of chaotic energy if you're creating something. I know when I'm creating something, whether it's writing, drawing, or creating something, it's always what I call chaos. And there's always this sense of, well, not so much danger, but it's almost like a fear of the unknown. Is this going to work? How is this going to go? But somehow we need to allow ourselves to really be in that energy. And then when it comes up, this is an image from a birthday card that my brother gave to me I think it was either on my 15th or 16th birthday. He clearly saw the rebel in me, even if I didn't at that time. And certainly it seems appropriate. And the reason I'm sharing it this year is because it's part of my, like I said, color revolution when everything is, okay, this is a blue gray, but this is about bringing the color back. And this is about doing something, being bold and being daring. So, like I said, he clearly recognized something within me before I did. And that's the thing about archetypes in general. It's maybe there's things that happen out in the world that activate the rebel within you. You know, archetypes have what I call is more like act hunger. It's a term that comes from psychodrama. Act hunger. They're desperate to act. They want to act. So the rebel, if it's calm, they're sort of going to be sitting around twiddling their thumbs. And so they're waiting for something to happen in the world. When I say the world, it could be your everyday, your immediate, or the bigger world to really get activated and, in a way, come online and take center stage. So that's why I ask you, look back. How has the rebel been active in your own life? And equally look back to those situations where you felt that desire to act out and to go against something, to go against what everyone else is saying. Um, but somehow you've not done it. And it's not giving yourself a hard time about that, but look at also the times when you've done something which is brave or, and daring when people have said, oh, no, no, you can't do that, but you've done it anyway. That's the energy that you want to be exploring this year. I mean, any year is a good year to do that, but certainly working with the energies, like I said, that archetypal soup that we're swimming in for the year ahead, this is a really opportune time to work with that. And I love this quote from Deng Min Dao is whether you remain the ash or become the phoenix is entirely up to you. It's literally giving you the responsibility to choose and knowing that one is no better than the other. If you choose to remain the ash because that's where you're at the moment, absolutely fine. But it's because you know you're actually choosing that. Or you become the phoenix, which again takes a certain amount of daring and boldness to start again. That's entirely up to you. So this is the end of this presentation. So, well, certainly the PowerPoint, but thank you. You can scan this barcode. It will take you to my link tree, which is where you can read or you can find out all about my work and all about forthcoming workshops, courses, retreats, and training in color psychodynamics. Let me just stop the share for a moment. If you didn't scan that barcode, I will also put it in the link in the comments below here. Well, here we are at the end of the beginning, and I just want to say thank you very much and have a wonderful, fabulous, active, and dynamic 2026, and see you at the beginning of 2027, which will be an orange year and the year of the jester. But until then, be bold, be brave, and begin again. Thank you very, very much. Bye bye.